Do we not have the most extraordinary band in the Valley? Wow. Thank you, Lizzie. Oh my God, that just was so soul-stirring. I guess I don't need to give a talk because really that song said it all. So, I know a lot of us, we come here, we watch online because we're looking for some refuge, a place to feel safe from the outside world, right? Because there's a lot of noise going on in our world right now that's scaring us, isn't it? Yeah. And sometimes we don't know how to cope with it. And it feels like we're getting into a prison, right? Like we're in a prison of fear, because that's what it's all about. You can call it politics. You can call it your issues with your relatives. You can call it climate change. But at the end of the day, it's just fear. And fear creates the most constrictive prison known to man. That's my belief in that. And when we're in that prison, our authentic voice cannot be heard because we don't believe in ourselves, because we're feeling that the world is, as we say, going to hell in a handbasket. So my talk title today is called How Free Are You? How free are you? I know we live in a free country. We can move about in our lives. We can make decisions. We can do all kinds of things. But are we really free? I myself can say sometimes I don't feel free. Sometimes I feel like the world outside of me is controlling me and not allowing me to be who I am and feel comfortable in life. So I want to ask you to ask yourself today, how free are you? Paramahansa Yogananda says freedom means the power to act by soul guidance, not by the compulsions of desires and habits. Obeying the ego leads to bondage. Obeying the soul brings liberation. And that's what we do here. We are here to liberate your soul. We are here to expose your ego that likes to tell you what to do, your ego that likes to keep things in a polarity, in a kind of a constrictive state, your ego that likes to say, I'm right, they're wrong. Is this familiar to anybody? Y'all got an ego? I got one. I have to look at it every day of my life to make sure I am not living from that space and instead go to that soul liberation state. I think because this outside world is doing what it's doing right now, that we ignore the soul because the soul knows better. And I have to admit, my holy confession this week is I fell into the fear big this week. I got stuck in that muddy place. Because somebody who I have a really lot of respect for, that's actually a longtime doctor of science of mind, he pressed the panic button. And I read a blog that he wrote, and I thought, oh my God, this is bad. Because I think his blog was something like, the worst is yet to come. And I thought, wow. But he's saying that, and I respect him, so I was so very confused by that. This person who's a science of mind are saying the worst is yet to come. And I know his blog was about finding our spirituality. I got it. But the fact that he said that, a lot of you know I was raised Jewish, but my Holocaust stuff started to come out. That's where I go. That is my go-to when panic and any kind of doomsday sort of idea is entering into this world. And so I'm going to my Holocaust stuff and I'm saying, oh my God, do I need to move somewhere? What do I need to do? They're coming after me. This is where my head goes. And I know it's irrational. And I'm working on it. But that's where I go. But I had to stop going there. And so I reminded myself about my soul. Because my soul is where my life is, not my human. My human's wonderful, but my soul, that's where all the energy is. That's where the wisdom is. That's where the light is. And when I go there, I remember what's possible. I remember that just because I'm hearing something doesn't make it so. We've got to remind ourselves about that because everybody has an opinion about where our country, where our world is going. And it is up to us to say, maybe not. Maybe not. Because we've got to open the door to another possibility when our minds go to the worst case scenario. And I'm here to hold you in that knowing that there's another possibility for everybody to be able to live in oneness, in kindness, and compassion. Now you see here the allegory of the cave. So Plato wrote this little piece called The Allegory of the Cave. And he wrote it or said it, I don't know if he actually wrote it, but it was it was created in like 380 BCE. In 380 BCE, we were still screwed up, and we still are, right? We've always been screwed up, evidently. And he wrote this wonderful allegory of the cave. And, you know, I heard about it a long time ago, but I took a consciousness expansion class a few years ago, and it was about quantum physics and that stuff. And the teacher started out with the allegory of the cave, and I was like going, what are we reading that old Greek philosophy for? We want to see, we want to hear about, the new people that are writing, Goswami and new, just all these new people. Why are we going back so far? And after I read the allegory of the cave, it was like, that's why. So the story goes like this, and this is abbreviated. I'm probably missing some details, so please forgive me. So the story is this, that humankind lives in a cave, and they're chained, head to toe, just changed, looking at this dark side of the wall. And above them is fire, and behind them is fire. And there are these people that are like little puppeteers, and all this stuff is getting projected onto this blank wall. So they're just seeing shadows. And humankind cannot release themselves from this bondage. They are stuck, they are chained, and that's all they can see. But one day, somebody got free. And he turned around and he said, well, look at that. This isn't real. This is just somebody projecting shadows. And so he was pulled out of the cave, and he was pulled into this beautiful sunlit nature scene. But he couldn't handle it because he wasn't used to the sun. It was way too bright. But he gave him a moment to get used to the brightness. And when his eyes adjusted, he saw how extraordinarily beautiful it was. So beautiful, so clear. He felt so free because he was in the light. And he was so excited, he had to go back to the cave and tell everybody about it, right? He wanted to free everybody to live this better life. So he goes running down in the cave, and he's saying, oh my gosh, you've got to come out here. And they said, you are nuts. And they were angry, and they didn't want anything to do with what he was telling them about. And that's where the story ends. But it leaves us with some really good information, because the allegory of the cave is what we have a tendency to live into, right? We see only what is being projected on this wall, and we think that's the truth. They're just shadows. We think that is the truth, when the truth is leaving the cave and being in the sun, being in the light, right? The light of spirit. So this is really a spiritual lesson for all of us. Because for me, I got caught up in the shadows this week. I was all locked in, chained up, looking at the shadows, thinking that's true. But then I remembered, I need to leave the cave. I need to leave the cave and go to my place where I know what is true, where I'm basking in the sunlight of spirit, where I feel free mentally, emotionally, spiritually. That is our natural state of being, not the cave, out in life, being at one with everything that is. And so we can all leave that cave. That's the story. You don't have to be stuck in the cave. It takes some energy, it takes some courage, it takes some willpower, but anybody can leave the cave. And what awaits us outside of the cave is life, the power of life as spirit, that's nourishing, that is life-giving, that provides everything that we require to live our greatest, most happiest, most joyful life. We become free when we see ourselves as the capital S self instead of the small s self. Because that ego I talked about earlier, it wants you small. It wants you small. It wants to be actually your jailer, because the ego has its own little jail cell that we tend to occupy. But when we're identifying with the big S self, that's our divine nature, God as we are. When we identify with that, we cannot possibly think that we are limited or lacking. We cannot think that things are impossible when we know who we are spiritually. We know that there's nothing that we cannot do. We know that we are fortified by a greater power that's beyond human comprehension, that always shows up for us whenever we invite it in and recognize it. The recognition of the presence of God or Spirit, whatever you want to call it. By the way, feel free to substitute any names that I call Spirit or God for your own. Higher power, love, intelligence, whatever works for you, please use it, because we all have different vocabulary, right? So the recognition of the presence of God or Spirit liberates us so that we are deeply aware of infinite possibilities, even in the midst of uncertainty. And boy, are we immersed in uncertainty right now. But guess what? We always are. This is not new. Life is always uncertain. And so the thing for me that I love to do is when I feel really uncertain, I go to what I know is the most certain, which is the presence of God or Spirit. Just saying that opens the door. It floods me with positivity. It gives me this optimism, this knowing that anything is possible. And just because this looks like it does, I am not getting caught up in that shadow. I am getting caught up in the sun, in life, in spirit, because then I know I don't need to worry. Uncertainty is what it is. What is certain is Spirit is I am, and it is always there, no matter what. And so it's like getting a vision of your heart. We all have it. I know some of us have not exercised that wisdom of the heart or the wisdom of the soul, but we can wake up to it at any time. Anytime. It is always there, sometimes hidden. But all we have to do is say, come out and play. That's it, because it responds to us when we recognize that it is there and invite it in to express, to illuminate, to bring us whatever it is that pulls peace and love into our souls. So this quote I know has been around. We always go to Viktor Frankl in times like this, so here I go. So Viktor Frankl, if you don't know who he is, he was in a concentration camp, and he was able to find the good in it, believe it or not. And he survived, obviously, and he wrote a book, Man's Search for Meaning, and there are some gems in there. And I always say, man, if Viktor Frankl could transcend and move through his experience, my God, I certainly can. So he says this: everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of human freedoms, which is to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. And this is really where our soul comes into play, because Viktor Frankl wasn't going to allow himself to go down. He was going to find that spark of life inside of himself. He found it in a bowl of soup that he was drinking one day. He found it everywhere, and that allowed him, I believe, and many others believe, that allowed him to make it through and survive his experience, because he knew that even though choice was being put on him by those that had him captive, there was one thing that they couldn't do. There was one thing, and that was to choose his attitude. To choose his attitude. And he chose the good. He chose the good. He chose the positive. He chose gratitude. He chose something that was beyond the circumstances of what he was in. Not an easy task, but he did it. And if he could do it, you could do it. I could do it. And so this is where we have that power inside of ourselves, but we have to see it. We have to utilize it. We have to put it to work and move into a state of being able to say, yeah, I can't choose what's going on in our outer world, but man, I can choose how I respond, rather than just reacting and getting part of what this whole angst is about. Because when we get in the angst, it doesn't help anybody. I don't know where I learned that. I learned as a young girl that you're supposed to worry and be concerned about everything, to the point of not being able to function. And one day I thought, why am I doing this? There was no use, right? Same for us. Getting caught in the angst is not productive. It is not helpful. And that's why we can choose to go somewhere else, to go to optimism, to go to the presence of Spirit and all that we are walking through. God is right in all of this, everybody. God is present in all of this. We just aren't seeing what we want to see, perhaps, but keep the faith, because everything's moving together. And I believe the more of us that are holding that higher watch of knowing what's possible, We are allowing that possible to rise up because we are one. We are all interconnected energetically. And if we're all holding this possibility of something happening, something changing, so that our world is a better place, you know what? It's going to happen. Just got to sit back and let it. So this is from the song that Barry did. And thank you, Barry, for doing Cat Stevens. Well, if you want to sing out, sing out. And if you want to be free, be free. Because there's a million things to be. You know that there are. You know that you are. Look at your lives. I know I've been a million things in my life because I could choose that. And you too. There's a million things you can do. And not just a million things you can do, but a million ways you can see life. A million ways you can see life. And didn't you love that song that Lizzie sang today? Wasn't that beautiful? She talked about the caged bird and being free. Being free in how we express ourselves in life. And when we're in this world of constriction, we don't like what's going on, our voice shuts down. It really does. We start doubting ourselves. When we're not in that energy of love and confidence, we lose it. And it shuts down. And then we just become part of this energy that isn't authentic, that isn't our soul energy. And so this is the time to set ourselves free. And be who we are no matter what. And bring that optimism. Bring the response, not the reaction. Bring this response as you. How you sing, how you express, how you see the world from a higher place. Because you know what? It is contagious. The more of us that are bringing that energy instead of the fear, the doomsday, the more of us that are saying, no way, we're not having that. We're going high. We're bringing in what we know Spirit is unfolding by means of all of us. That's the place to keep our consciousness. So get into tune, find your own note, and sound it loud and clear, for you are part of the vast orchestra of life. You have a specific part to play. So do not try to play anyone else's part. Play your own part. We get so caught up in everybody needing to look the same, be the same, dress the same. And honestly, I love it when people come in and they are vastly different, because that inspires us to try something different, to be a little out of the box. I love, love, love people like that, because they remind me that I don't need to be like everybody else. I don't need to be responding to the world in the same way everybody is. I can go to a different place. And what is so cool, we may not see this in our everyday life because we're doing all this stuff, but we are all part of a really beautiful, intricate tapestry that is interwoven together. And like an orchestra, you each play your own tune. But it is a melody that is harmonious and lovely and wonderful. So play your own tune. Come to the drum circle, you can beat your own tune. So Ernest Holmes says this: we have thought that outside things controlled us, when all the time we have had that within that could have changed everything and given us freedom from bondage. And I love Ernest because he's all about freedom. His first page of The Science of Mind, he says, bondage is not God ordained. Freedom is the natural birthright of every living soul. So it's time to get our minds out of being so attached to the things of this world, to the happenings of this world. It's time to free us from saying, they're saying this can't happen. Time to break it apart. As Ernest says, the freedom is within, and it's knowing who you are spiritually. It is knowing the power and presence of God is everywhere present, not in certain corners, not in certain people, everywhere. And when we all in this community, those of you that are online, when we recognize and know that, we are sending out a very, very powerful vibration and frequency that is going everywhere because we're that interconnected with others. So find your freedom inside of you. So my last slide is this. I'm a big U2 fan. And in one of their songs, they say this: free yourself to be yourself. If only you could see yourself. If only you could. And I'm here to tell you, I see you. I see all of you online, as the divine that you are. And I want you to see it as well inside of you, because that's the only way that we're going to free ourselves. That breaks the shackles. That loosens it all up, loosens the chains, gets rid of them when we know who we are as spiritual beings. And if that doesn't make sense to you as you being a spiritual being, take a moment and put your hand on your heart. You feel it beating. You feel the circulation of energy. You are so divine in nature. We all are. And so we need to free ourselves to be who we are so that we can have a better life and bring a better reality to our world. Because the freedom of this planet, of our humanity, starts with our freedom. Have a wonderful day, and thank you for listening to me. Namaste.